Here I am with Paul Quimby,
Yeah.
and I have to apologize because I don't know all of the positions you were in here in
Right.
town while you were working for the GJPD, correct?
Right. Yep.
Go ahead and bring that in real close if you don't mind, man.
Sure.
There you go.
How's that?
Yeah.
That's my deep, sexy voice there.
So kind of give us just a real quick recap on your career here in Grand Junction, and then maybe we'll dive into a little bit
Okay.
before that.
Okay. Well, first of all, I grew up here most of my first grade through 2 years of college.
Okay.
Went away to Arizona for about 13 years. And then in 1991, I came back here to work for the Grand Junction Police Department. So I started off, at the bottom as a patrolman.
Okay.
Did that for, the first 3 years or so. And then I got into being a school resource officer. And back then, it was a totally different program that we ran with school resource officers than what they do today. But I was a school resource officer for approximately 5 years. So then in about 1997 or so, I became a training officer for the police department. So I was a field training officer on patrol. And I did that, and then I got promoted to sergeant on patrol. And then, I was on patrol as a sergeant for, 3 or 4 months, not even 3 months, I don't think.
Oh, okay.
And I got moved over to what was then, it was a remake under the chief that we had then of the community relations program. It's what most people would call it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I worked in that position. They called it the community advocacy program. And I did that for, 5 years or something like that. And then I got promoted to commander. And I need to back up. When I was the sergeant of the community resource program, then I moved to a sergeant in investigations. I can't forget that for a while. So then I was the sergeant in general investigations for, 3 or 4 years. And then I got promoted to commander, went to patrol for a couple of years on that. And then I took over what most people would think of as internal affairs unit. But it was basically everything that didn't have anything to do with arresting people and putting them in jail.
Oh, okay.
So it was everything from making sure that, the building was taken care of to the cars had, service done to them, to, buying the cars, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it didn't have anything to do with real police work, but if it wasn't done, there would be no real police work. So,
Sure.
And then I retired from that position in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So for the layman person who doesn't necessarily understand all of those positions,
Right.
Because I know you've got obviously your patrolman,
Right.
And then just from the little amount of conversations, well, not a little bit, but one of my best friends works for the sheriff's department.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And so, he does a lot of like street crimes types of
Right.
things,
Mm-hmm.
and so so it's interesting to start to hear like what all of these little positions that really go on, because usually it's just patrolmen and people that tell them what to do.
Right. That's what most people's contact with the police is going to be. Is going
Right.
to be, a patrol officer. For most people, it's going to be a traffic, whether it's a traffic accident or a speeding ticket. Then,
Right.
People that are victim of, more of the normal crime that we have around here is going to be a patrolman that's going to respond and take your information. And, of course, if it turns into anything, then you get the investigators involved.
Yeah.
But that's what most people see is the guy in uniform out, driving the car. That's who they're most likely to have contact with until they get into deeper problems, whether it's as a victim or as a perpetrator
Right.
Then
you start meeting all kinds of people.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but then there's all stuff behind all that, especially here. We're kind of unique because of the fact that we're the largest community, on the Western Slope. And so we have a lot of services that are unique to a lot of places, like our communication center that we have here. It's really large, and it takes real good care of a whole bunch of different agencies. I don't know, the count is up close to 30 or more, because everybody thinks of the police and the police department, sheriff's department, but there's a whole bunch of volunteer fire departments, the major fire department, Clifton Fire Department, Grand Junction Fire Department, and they take care of everything. But that's all right in the GJPD building downtown, and it's a joint effort. And we have like bomb service. Well, the bomb training, not every little police department on the Western Slope, can afford to send one of their guys to get trained. And so the bomb guy used to be kind of a pet peeve of mine, because our bomb guys would always be getting sent off someplace else besides here. But, that was how things worked.
Like you're saying Western Slope, so like that department would be covering like anywhere from like Craig all the way to like Durango.
Oh yeah. They some of their stuff, they went to Aspen. There were some things that they went to. I mean, they've been just about every place on the Western Slope.
Yeah.
Working cases, and of course then that takes time away from here, but that's the attitude that people have around here is, if we can help somebody, we're gonna go help them. So there's always been that cooperation with law enforcement. There's very little territory, turf wars where
Sure.
this is our. I mean, there's certain things you don't want to, you don't want to go do, outside your jurisdiction, or
Right.
you don't want to. And that has happened. Sometimes that does go on, but for the most part, everybody works, real strong together here.
Yeah, you have to, because as soon as you get bad rub going on,
right,
it gets messy real fast.
Oh yeah. And there's been times over the years where things weren't as smooth as they could have been, but for the most part, that's a real big asset to the people that live here, because there is all that cooperation and everything that goes on. And the other side of that is the community here has, for the most part, been super supportive of law enforcement. I mean, I couldn't think of a better place to work because of how the community does overall support the police here. So that makes it a really nice place to come and do what the police are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's just a really good size.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
Right.
we don't have like all the real nice amenities that you want to do.
Right.
If you want to go to Denver or Salt Lake or something.
Right.
But it's a nice size, because, and again, in conversations with my law enforcement friends, I'm like, really? That actually happened here? Because there is a lot that goes on.
Well, that's one thing that I always tell people is there's so much stuff that goes on that you probably don't want to know about.
Right.
The media covers what they get footage of, or what they think is important.
Yeah.
But for TV news, if they don't have video,
right,
it's not fun. And then if they have video of something stupid,
right,
they're gonna put something stupid on, because that's what TV needs video. But we don't have reporters that are out there digging up stories and
investigative
doing that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And that's that term investigative reporters always bugged me, because every reporter ought to be an so it's like redundant.
Yeah.
You're an investigative reporter. Well, what other kind is there? I mean,
that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. But we don't have we don't have that.
Yeah.
And before I worked here, I worked in Phoenix for the state of Arizona, and I mean, they had reporters down there, and it was, way different kind of market. Two big newspapers, so they competed against each other.
Yeah.
And there were some reporters that dug stuff up. They worked, and they, you had to stay on your game.
Yeah.
Because if you screwed something up, on the police side of it, you were probably going to be reading about it, in the paper. And so that was kind of good because it kept us on our toes. But it also informed.
There's accountability there.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Both ways, and they informed the public. To me, a lot of times the media here, they get an assignment to go talk to somebody. They ask 3, mundane questions, and they, like a happy cat,
Right.
Okay. And then off they go, and, they don't dig stuff up. I mean, if people were to spend time down at the courthouse looking at, court filings and things that go on in court, they'd be like, oh, I can't believe that goes on here.
Yeah.
And conversely, like just doing police ride-alongs, people are constantly amazed.
I've been wanting to do that with my buddy for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And I just need to get down there and get the background check and all of that and do
You're
that.
worried about that background check, are you?
Oh, man. Maybe. I don't know. to my knowledge, I'm not too worried about it.
I think you'd pass, but...
Yeah. It's more just just getting the discipline to run down there and do it.
Yeah.
But I know that my brother has ridden along with Blake McClellan quite a bit. I don't know if I should have name dropped that or not, but
well, I can remember seeing your brother out with Blake.
Oh, really?
Years ago. Yeah, I think I was out working one night and ran in. We all crossed paths, and I was like, oh, okay. But
a lot going on tonight.
Yeah. But yeah, people are surprised, on stuff that does go on. I mean, there's a whole another subculture out there, that most people don't know, and then there's some people that's all they know, and they don't know, the other subcultures, I guess, that exist, and so it can be a real eye-opening experience. And
it's interesting because being educated is a good thing. Being educated on kind of what goes on is a good thing. But I do think there's some wisdom in, how much everybody knows. I'm sure that's a pretty fine line,
Oh yeah.
Because, you fall too far either way could cause more trouble than you originally wanted.
No, sure.
Yeah.
Right. And it was always, I mean, the police get invited to people's houses when people don't want them there. I guess invite my, we always joke about, fireman shows up and, people want the fireman there, they want the fireman to be doing stuff. And a lot of times when the police show up, there's somebody there that doesn't want the police there.
Yeah.
And I think that's been heightened or exacerbated, the last, decade or so.
Well, sure.
With all the controversies and things that come up. But the police see a lot of things, in people's lives. They see people at their worst. They see people when they're mad. They see, when people are arguing about stuff. And we go to just about anybody's house. I mean, we've been in the finest houses in Grand Junction. We've been in the lowest dives. We've been in the homeless camps. And we see all kinds of things that go on, and a lot of things that people would rather not see, know about. Have going on out there. So it puts you in a unique position. Like, a lot of times I'll run into people, and I've been really off the streets for a number of years. Been retired now for 4 years. And you'll see people someplace, and I have a pretty. I mean, when stuff is done, it's done, and I don't remember a whole lot. But I'll see somebody, and they'll say, "Gee, you look familiar." They're thinking, about how do I know you? And you always have to be careful with how you answer that, because you don't know if it's from church, from athletics, or because, I arrested your son, daughter, husband, wife, brother. You're not sure whether it's a pleasant memory or something like that. And of course, a lot of people will say that to you in a group of people. And so, you kind of gauge it. And a lot of times they'll look at it and say, oh, you don't remember. I guess we can't
go the safe route.
You don't want to talk about it. And
yeah.
Then they'll be, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm a police officer. Don't you remember?
Don't you remember when you did X, Y, and Z?
And usually, I'm just joking with them, making it up.
Right.
But, once in a while it'll be, oh, yeah. Now, I mean, I had my oil changed, a couple months ago, and the guy in the oil change place is looking at me and looks at my name, and he says, oh, I know where I knew you from.
Uh-huh.
He says, you stopped me on prom night, and I was in a hurry to go get my girlfriend's corsage, so you stopped me for speeding. And I was all, scared, nervous, and all that. And you gave me a warning after you realized, that it was my prom night and all that stuff. And you kind of, made me feel appropriately repentive.
Yeah.
But that was, 30.
Right. I can't believe you even remembered that.
25 years ago or something like that,
Wow. Man, that's... Someone recognizes you, maybe they ask you about that, but they're with their friends or they're with their family.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, well...
Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Yeah. Oh, you don't want to remember that.
Yeah. How long were you driving for in town? Paroling. Like doing patrol.
Oh, it got broken up a lot. But, most of my career, I was always got in some special units after not too long. So like, when I was in the community resource program, our school resource, and back then, I mean, that was the mid-90s school resource program. I mean, almost half the time I didn't even wear a uniform because the idea was that you would be on school campuses hanging out with kids. And a lot of people would say you're just being their buddy. Yeah. And we didn't do much enforcement work. And frankly, there was a lot less enforcement kind of things to do back then.
Yeah.
And but then in the summertime, they'd use us on patrol. And so I'd get to... And so I was on the bicycle patrol, and that was probably one of the most fun jobs that you could have, was working summertime in Grand Junction, riding a bike at night.
Yeah. Now, bike patrol, do you mean motorcycle or?
No, bicycle.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was, again, I guess one of the new innovations for policing, that came along, I can remember we had our first bicycle team, and I was kind of on the second round of that, and that was a fun assignment.
And that was at night usually?
Usually at night. I mean,
Really?
there'd be guys that'd be assigned to ride during the day, and I did not want to do that.
Well, who would want to ride during the day in the summertime? Good grief. Especially with the dark clothes.
Right,
exactly. You guys are all padded up. And
yeah.
Yeah.
But we'd work, the evenings into, like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And when things were really good, you didn't ever have to get in a car. You just were on a bike, and they'd assign you to, typically what we would do would be assigned to work downtown.
Okay.
And then go hit North Avenue. Mm-hmm. And back then, society has changed.
It has.
So much since then. I mean, cell phones and, the communication that people have now has really changed a lot of things. Back in the 90s, you could go to any large parking lot on North Avenue in Grand Junction on a Friday night, Saturday night, and it would be at least half full of kids in cars, some just hanging out, just having a good time, and some up to things that they probably didn't want their parents to know about.
Right.
And so on a bicycle, it was fantastic because they'd never seen a bike on a cop before.
Right.
A bike on a cop right. on a bike.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the bike was on the cop too. That happened. But I can remember, Der Wiener Schnitzel, on North Ave used to be a hot spot.
Yeah.
And I can remember one time me and my partner back there, and we're on bike, and there's some kids, bunch of cars back there, and they're drinking and passing bottles around, and so we go riding up on our bike, and I ride up to a window of a car, and then on the other side of the parking lot a patrol car pulls in, and of course me and my partner had been there for a minute or so.
Sure.
And then somebody yells, "The cops!" And so this kid in this car hands me some booze out the window and says, "Hey, get rid of this, the cops are coming." And I'm standing there on my bike, and I say, "Yeah, we're already here." And then he looks at me and he says, "No." So that was kind of, we had.
He literally reached.
Oh yeah, reaching, was handing it to me because he's looking at the cop car coming in.
Yeah.
He knows that they're just a bunch of friends around, and
like mingling,
handing a bottle of something out to me, and that was just that was funny. But they didn't know that cops rode bikes.
Yeah,
and
you could come right up on them.
Oh yeah, and so that was fun. But now society has changed so much, and I attribute it to the communication.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have to go to North Avenue. I mean, when I was a kid growing up here, and that you'd have to go drive, walk, bicycle, or whatever to talk to people to find out, hey, what's going on, or to see your
just
friends,
to socialize.
or whatever. Right, to socialize.
Yeah.
And now you don't have to do that. You can, send out a message to 100 of your best friends and say, hey, somebody's parents are gone. Let's go over their house, or we're meeting up here, or we're going to be doing this.
Yeah.
And so you don't have those big congregating groups that are, some are out just to have fun, some are out to do some things that maybe, they shouldn't be doing.
That brings up a good point, because, there's a part of me that the nostalgia of that going out and hanging out with your friends and stuff that is really appealing, and you just kind of remember all of those times.
Right.
And now it's moved more towards, like you said, you can communicate just from your home, and probably most kids are just staying at their own home.
I think so.
And communicating with each other.
Right.
So on a safety end of things, maybe that's a good thing. But gosh, man, like getting out and talking, is I think something that we're losing.
It's a lost art.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I along that line. When I remember when I was a kid, you'd call a girl up, when you're a teenager or something, and you'd be absolutely petrified that her dad, or mom was going to answer the phone. You'd hope that, she was going to answer the phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I may have called somebody up and maybe not, completed the call by hanging up real quick. But, nowadays, first of all, she's probably got her own phone. So you call her, she knows who's calling. Yep. So she knows whether she wants to answer it or not. And, you're going to talk to her.
Yeah.
And you don't have to even worry about that. Or like in my family, where I had 5 siblings, that they're all going to be sitting there listening to my conversation.
Well, especially when you finally got multiple phones in the house, right? It was super easy to eavesdrop on.
Just go pick up. And so
don't have to worry about any of that anymore.
That's all changed. Yeah. So but that was always probably a good thing, that parents were screening phone calls a little bit.
Yeah.
Now it's, you don't know who's talking to your kid sometimes.
That's true.
And then there's a whole, really, bad aspect of that, where it, might be some 30-year-old guy calling your, 14-year-old daughter and all that stuff.
Oh man, it gets dark real quick.
Yep.
Yeah, I would imagine that. Okay, even though you got a bunch of, we'll kind of go back to the days of cruising north and stuff.
Yeah.
Even though you have a bunch of kids, who, there's always some thrill of mischief, at whatever level that is, right? It could it could be drinking, it could be I know kids were doing drugs and stuff, but maybe not to the extent that's what's going on now. But, or just being sneaky, was kind of fun. However, when you got a bunch of kids together, so in one parking lot, you got like 50 people.
Right.
There will tend to be at least some sort of moral ceiling that's automatically created.
Right.
You're not going to go past this because you don't want to hurt somebody, and whether that would be emotionally or physically or whatever.
Right.
And so the group collective would probably kind of create its own, like moral standard.
Oh yeah, and if there was somebody that was doing something, that was outside that standard, they would get ostracized, real quick.
Or at least told on.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there, and there was all kinds of groups. I mean, there was, the groups that, this was their thing, like car guys, people that just like the cars, and that's what they were out there for. And then there'd be the people that are out there looking for, where's the party? I want a party. I want to, find out where the party is. And there's other kids that just wanted to, hang out.
And motorcycle group.
The cowboys. Just all kinds of groups, and usually they got along. Sometimes though, somebody would make somebody mad, and then there'd be a little competition going on, or a fight, and then we'd have to kind of keep an eye on that and try to keep things from getting too out of hand.
But the more eyes and ears you have in an area, the less likely you probably are to try to do something stupid.
Hopefully,
right.
But we always had a saying in the police department that we only catch the dumb ones.
Yeah.
That's true. If you're really smart and a little bit careful, greatly increases your chances of getting away with something. But we would, a lot of times on, and it could be, whether it's a burglary case or, theft, whatever it is, we'd always get lucky, but usually we'd look at each other and say, well, that's because they're stupid on, they shouldn't have done it. You could have done it this way and you could have got away with it. But
right.
Yeah.
Again, another fine line of either you probably sometimes sense some compassion, like, oh man, you did it so dumb, and now you're in trouble,
right.
or kind of, which you're glad, because obviously you don't want something to get worse or someone to get hurt or anything like that. But okay, so after a night of, we'll stick with kind of back in the days, you probably had to go back to the station and have stories all the time of and I envision you guys like just cracking up all the time.
Well, I mean, first of all, humor is always a big thing in police work, just because of the darker side of things that you see. You got to use humor.
Yeah.
You got to be able to laugh about yourself. You got to be able to laugh about what happens, but you also have to be a little bit sensitive.
Sure.
To people, because you never know when your laughter, is either going to lighten a mood, because sometimes you use it with citizens to try to lighten a mood, and sometimes it works. And sometimes it's the absolute, you just set somebody off because, you smile and somebody, oh, you think this is funny, and then they go, Well,
especially now, not really to get into that political realm or anything like that, but man, it's super sensitive now.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's important for people to get back to the being able to laugh at yourself. I think
absolutely.
There's a lot more health in that. But yeah, I mean, continue. You go.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember one time downtown, working patrol, bar closing time, and catch a young man peeing in an alley. And he's a little bit drunk, and we walk up to him, and that's against law. You're not supposed to do that. And he obviously was concerned about the effect on his future career and everything. He was a college student, and everything that was going to happen. And one of the officers makes a joke about, so I can't remember what the joke was, but it was funny.
Mm-hmm.
And the young man just a totally meltdown. This is going to ruin my life, and you're sitting here joking about it. And,
no.
And so we tried to use humor to alleviate his stress.
Mm-hmm.
And he just totally, this is not right that you're making fun of me and you guys are laughing about this. And, you try to look at it from their position.
Sure.
Because that's, we're there to help make things a little better if we can. But sometimes
peeing in an alley is not going to ruin your life.
No, but he was convinced that it was.
Sure. But he's also got some intoxicated persuasion going on there.
Oh yeah. Right. And hopefully officers, recognize that and cut people at least a little bit of slack.
Yeah.
But they, you're probably a, really reasonable, nice guy most of the time. But right now you're just not on your game, and
you're not on your game.
We'll give you a little bit of slack for that if the situation is appropriate for that.
I know that I've been given a lot of stuff. Not that I'm doing terrible things, but like speeding, I've been multiple times just kind of let go, and I'm very grateful for it. I tend to drive pretty fast, but I think I've got maybe 2, maybe 3 speeding tickets in my life, but I've been pulled over at least a dozen times.
That's a pretty good record.
I mean,
Yeah, and my attitude with that was always, especially when it came to driving traffic stuff, you want to get people to drive. I mean, the end goal is you want people to drive safe.
Right.
And a lot of times just my contacting you is going to bring you back to, either paying attention or whatever. And if that happens and I've achieved my goal of getting you to drive safer, the problem that you have as a police officer that you quickly grow to understand is that people lie to you all the time. And so you don't know, and you have a tendency not to believe what people tell you.
Right.
And I have story after story after story I could tell you where people, tell you, I've never been stopped before, and this is my first,
and you're
blah,
like
blah,
looking
blah.
at the record.
And you can, back in the, this dates me a little bit. We weren't able to look at that.
Oh, okay.
So easy out there on the street.
Sure.
Now, I'm jealous of what cops can see now.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can see, they go back and look on their computer, and they can see your whole driving history immediately. And they know, a lot back before that time, you would, listen to people and they'd tell you a story and you never had any idea of whether they were telling the truth or not. I remember, and this is a story that I used to tell one night. It was a Sunday evening downtown. 2 prim and proper little old ladies run, a red light. And they have their Bibles on the dashboard, and they dress like they've been in church. And she doesn't have her proof of insurance with her, which is a bigger deal. And again, back then, I couldn't look on a database. They had to have their little card with them. And if they didn't have it, that was the proof that I had. But, I got 2 prim and proper, nice little old ladies. Oh, officer, I'm so sorry. It's sitting right on the dining table. It's there. And okay, I believe you. But I do need you to get it and bring it down to the police department. Nowadays they could just take a picture with their phone, but that this was before people could do that kind of thing. And I tell you what, I'll meet you at the police department in 45 minutes. And so bring that down. Oh, okay, officer, I will, And so I go, back down to the police department. 45 minutes later, doesn't show up. So then I go up to dispatch and I say, hey, could you check this lady that I, stopped earlier? Oh yeah, she's got like four citations in the last, year for no proof of insurance.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And, I totally, I believed her,
Sure.
And those kind of things, you just learn that, people aren't always going to be truthful with you. You try not to get too judgmental. The thing I always said is, what they're telling me is what they're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's a lie, but those are the words that came out of their mouth. And until I have some proof one way or another, I'm not really going to believe you. I'm not going to disbelieve you, but
well, I got two things off that. First of all, I can't even imagine that you'd be like, hey, in 45 minutes, meet me back at the station so that we can run this. Like,
right.
Nowadays, that seems like such an inefficient.
Oh, sure.
Your time. That's so inefficient.
Right.
But again, back then that was probably just normal, and
right.
It's so, but like, I mean, you're trusting people that they'll actually show up. I'm actually
right.
Did you ever have anybody?
Oh, sure.
Back?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the way I looked at it is, I'm giving them a bit of a break by not writing a ticket or trusting them at that point.
Yeah.
And I want to put a little onus on them to, step up and say, okay, yeah. And it was an indication to me. I mean, when they didn't show up, I knew pretty quick.
Let's run their numbers.
Probably wasn't, but. You just get so that, people talk about officers getting jaded.
That was my second thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully you just understand that people are people. And a lot of people, when they're put in a pressure situation, and being contacted by the police for speeding or whatever, an officer does it all the time. It's no big deal. The officer doing his part, but that citizen that you're stopping, possibly, it really is a pressure situation for them.
Right.
And
that's true. Yeah.
You need to know that people get a little pressure put on them. They may not be totally truthful about things, and cut them a little bit of slack, hopefully. But you also have to be able to judge. Whether people are being truthful or not with you too.
Well, and that's just the hardest part of the job right there.
Right.
Is,
right.
I mean, Sunday morning, my friend Paul Quimby, is the nicest guy all the time, and giving the benefit of the doubt to everybody. Right. But I mean, as soon as you're in your outfit, you're in your blues and stuff. I mean, it's giving the benefit of the doubt, especially today. I mean, it's a lot different than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's I would hope too that you're in your civilians now, obviously, but like when I remember running into you actually when you would be in your blues, and I would have even more respect, though. There was this sense of even more respect, and that you're doing your job. You're on right now, right? And so, and I didn't know either, like, what you're doing. I mean, are you investigating something?
Sure.
Are you here because you're looking for things, and so I want to kind of get out of the way? So it was really interesting too, because like, how do I act? Like, you're my friend, and on Sunday morning, it's like, hey man, how's it going? And then, but you're working, and
well, that was a tough thing for when I was a school resource officer. Like, kids would see me at school all the time in uniform, and I'd be playing basketball with them. I'd be, in the library. I'd be eating lunch with them. And then, like, in the summertime, I'd be working patrol, and I might be at, JUCO was always a big thing for the police to be keeping an eye on things. And, we might be in the middle of, investigating something, and here
you
comes
mean like that sardine packed
that
full
thing.
Of kids under the bleachers?
Yeah. I don't know if that happens anymore. I haven't been to JUCO.
It doesn't happen at all anymore. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, that will
shoulder to shoulder teenagers.
I mean, I grew up here. JUCO has been part of life, and I mean, all kids, would just be packed like you say down there. And I mean, we used to have special overtime patrol. I mean, we'd have 10, 12 cops or more assigned to JUCO, And the 90% of the job was to keep an eye on all the kids that weren't watching the baseball game.
Because none of them were.
And now I don't even know if they assign, officers. They have private security, but they don't. Apparently, that's not a thing anymore.
No, I remember I was the kid that was actually afraid to go downstairs.
Oh yeah,
I didn't like that environment. It was
Absolutely.
dark. And I was just kind of I wasn't a homebody kid, but like that's just my personality, I guess. So I hated having to go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah, because you had to go through a crowd,
and it was a crowd. I mean, I'm not exaggerating for our listeners and stuff, especially the kids these days that they don't understand what it was like under there.
No.
It was packed full of kids.
Right.
Shoulder to shoulder, like just, and you had to kind of weave and slip your way to the bathrooms. Right. And
that was one of the complaints that we would get from, the baseball adults.
From the viewers.
They'd be there and they'd go to the concession stand and they could hardly, get to the concession stand. And then, when they did, they're carrying their drinks back to the stands, and they're getting jostled by kids and everything. And that would be a very common complaint that we would get is, what are you going to do about all these kids? And it was like, well, yeah, we are kind of glorified babysitters, and
but they're making lots of money off of those kids too, just for being in there. Right. So I get it, and again, I mean, at least you know where they're at.
Yep. Yeah.
At least you know where the kids are at. And so I didn't mean to really deter you off from where you were going before, but that just goes right in line with what I like to do with this podcast anyways,
right.
Is think about those things and reminisce. And
but then that was, kids would see me there and they would be used to, oh, there's Officer Quimby, and they want to come running up and, talk to me and see what's going on. And I might be in the middle of, investigating, some couple that just had a spat and punched each other. And, the kids would be, thinking that I'm, the school resource officer. And I kind of have to, say, no.
Ooh, that's tough.
No, I'm working right now. Really, I really can't let you play with my handcuffs right now because I might need them. But
that's an interesting dynamic.
They would learn, but that's what they were used to seeing me in that, being on the school grounds and, being able to give all my attention to them and having to switch. And you mentioned earlier about, when you'd see me, the uniform would bring, some in you would bring out respect. Well, that's not true for everybody.
Right.
Some people, it's kind of the opposite of that. And I know when I first started working in police uniform, I kind of had this idea that, I'm going to show up at a, loud party, and, just the fact that I, walk in there with my uniform, everybody's going to look and say, okay, it's time to behave. And that isn't what happens. And I can remember, when the one part is like at 9th in Colorado, and going down there, and there's this big party going on, college party going on, and several of us arrive and get out of the car and go walking into this mass of people, and they're like, who invited you, and get the hell out of here.
Really?
And it was like, I was brought up, and most of my friends and everybody, the uniform, like you mentioned earlier, they'd see it, and there would be some respect.
Yeah.
And so that was like, okay, that doesn't, just walking into the room doesn't work with everybody.
Doesn't demand it like with everybody.
No. Huh. And of course, and you gotta, make sure that your officers realize, how to deal with that. You can't go in and make them respect you. You can't go in and demand, well, I'm in uniform, you got to do this. But sometimes, depending on the situation, you got to get people's attention. You got to let them know the seriousness of the matter, that you mean business, but we can temper this a little bit, or maybe negotiate a little bit. But
that's an interesting point. Negotiate, compromise on something. You're not there to kill their fun,
No.
Yeah.
No, and a lot of times, the standard thing was, you'd give them a warning.
Mm-hmm.
If you got a little bit of cooperation from somebody, you'd give them a warning, and you'd tell them, especially at like a college or high school party where things were a little loud,
mm-hmm.
Keep the noise down, control the crowd, keep people inside so that your neighbors aren't calling us, and we'll be, we're going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have to come back because these things aren't being done, somebody's going to get a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, if you want some help managing your crowd, we'll be happy to tell people that they need to leave. Or if there are certain people that you want to leave,
sure.
And most of the time you'd be going back.
Right.
and issuing a ticket.
Who would you give the ticket to?
To whoever with a college thing, it was whoever lived at the house that was
mm-hmm.
that was present.
Mm-hmm.
The homeowner typically, whoever lived there,
right,
would typically get the ticket. But a lot of times they would say, okay, yeah, I realize things are out of hand, and sometimes they'd call us back and they'd say, hey,
we need some backup.
We need help. So
we need some backup.
And that was a much better tact to take because, then we were there to help them and clean things up. And but, the neighbors were also a big driving force too. If the neighbors were good with it, wasn't as bad a deal, but usually it would just be maybe that one neighbor that, I've got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to work. And it's like, okay.
Were you in some sort of PR position at one time?
Well, the community advocacy program, the community relations unit, we oversaw the PIO position for the police department.
I don't know what PIO stands for.
A public information officer, police information officer. So, and that, I always like the idea of having a police officer, somebody in uniform, being that spokesperson
mm-hmm.
for the police department. I
mm-hmm.
thought that just added a little bit more, and then their knowledge of police work greatly improved the information that they were able to provide
mm-hmm.
to the public. And we had one of the greatest ones you could ever have at the police department. Sherry Zen,
mm-hmm.
Was just perfect for that. She was a police officer. She was very, amicable, well-spoken, knowledgeable, presented a good image of the police department,
mm-hmm.
and did a wonderful job doing that. But of course, when she retired, that was it's a sad day for me.
Big shoes to fill.
I always liked having officers fill that. But then they moved away from, you're paying an officer a lot of money, and it wasn't a full-time position. It was always a side,
mm-hmm.
it was one of your side assignments that you'd have. And then they've gone to, civilians, and not to take away from the job that the civilian PIO people do.
Mm-hmm.
Call me old school. I liked having, somebody in uniform did. So I oversaw that aspect of the police department for a few years, and was one of the primary spokespeople for the department for a while. And that's where I think when I'd get people that would recognize me and they'd say, "Where do I know you from?"
Yeah.
It was a lot more common, I think, back then to have local police on the news at least a couple nights a week with something going on. Now I don't see it that much, and I think that there's just not as much local reporting stuff that the TV stations are able to do, and that's changed a little bit.
It does seem like, and we've talked about this already a little bit, but it does seem like a lot more is kept on maybe the down low, as far as what's going on, and that's probably a better. It's probably better that way.
Well, it's a fine line because transparency is a big term nowadays, and
big term.
I've heard stories from the old days on things that went on that were like, I can't believe that, that happened.
Yeah.
And, the way that things were handled. And it was like, today you absolutely couldn't do that. But that's always a fine line to walk on transparency, because, you don't ever want to cover something up that, shouldn't happen, that shouldn't. And, you could probably argue about, is there anything that ever should be? And, I could probably come up with a couple examples of things that, do you want everybody, knowing this? There's no good public reason. It's not going to serve the public good to have people know some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But to try to cover something up, or something bad happens, to try to cover it up, that is absolutely, you got to face, you got to face it.
Well, there's got to be some sort of an avenue too, where this is the road of transparency. If you want to dig into that, fine, here it is.
Right.
But the whole public doesn't need to know that.
And then you get into the people's right to know, and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
And,
I get real careful with what questions I ask my buddy, who's in the sheriff's department. And and sometimes he shares stuff, and I was like, I don't know if I should know that or not. But it's cool for the story, obviously.
Sure.
And obviously he trusts me,
right?
And we have and he's not giving me information that he should.
Right. I mean, you can tell a story without names and too many details on stuff. But
and actually, that brings me up to the next question that I wanted to ask you. What was like one of the most difficult situations that you'd found yourself in?
Well, I got in a shooting.
Okay.
Like 1997 downtown.
Mm-hmm.
It was something just happened really super quick.
Mm-hmm.
And of course there was all the turmoil that came out of that, and it was it involved a young man that had been one of my school resource
really?
students. That's how I knew him. I knew that he had, in fact, his probation officer, I think his probation officer had called me. It was during JUCO.
Okay.
That time of year, and his probation officer had called me and said, "Hey, he hasn't reported for a while. I'm worried about him and what he's up to."
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I needed to keep an eye out to see. And then, downtown, one night on bike patrol,
okay.
See him, and I know right away that he's got a warrant for his arrest, and
because he hasn't checked in,
because he hadn't been checking in with his probation officer, and but I had known. I mean, I can remember the very first time in 5th grade that I saw him, because he was a new kid at the school, and I got introduced to him, and I can still remember he had a big, huge smile on his face, and, I can remember that. And so I didn't expect, any trouble from him, but he had a gun on him, and he knew he had a gun on him. I didn't know he had a gun on him. And, I go to say, "Hey, I need to talk to you."
Like what was that? So you just saw him walking downtown?
Yeah, it was the Mesa Theater used to have teen nights, where they would have a non-alcohol venue for kids to show up, and it was popular, and we're down there on bike patrol, just keeping an eye on things. And as soon as I see him, I
doing your job.
Knew that he had a warrant for his arrest. But all my contacts with him had always been, pretty easy going, because I'd known him since he was in 5th grade, and but I, didn't know what he had been doing in the intervening, 5 or 6, 7 years. Didn't know what he was up to that night, but I knew I needed to talk to him, and he takes off running, and so, and it was on bikes, you're on a bike and somebody's running from you on foot, It's not much of a horse race,
right?
He was kind of, but then he pulled out so we're chasing after him, and then he decides to stop and pull out his gun and
pulled his gun out.
Yeah, and so he got shot, was not killed.
Okay,
was
That's
wounded,
good.
And of course there was then the ensuing investigation and everything, which is done much more professionally now than it was back in the day. There's a much better system in place for the investigation, multi-agency investigation into those kind of things. And sadly, we've had so many of them,
right, that
the county has come up with we've got a really good system in place for dealing with those things.
Yeah.
But the kid was Hispanic, and I can remember people calling us racist, back then because it was two white cops and
a
17-year-old Hispanic
nothing's changed,
that got shot by the police, and that had absolutely nothing to do with the contact or anything, but so we had to endure a little bit, and it wasn't too bad. I mean, there were it was mostly people that were friends or relatives of his that were Hispanic kid got shot by the cops, so it's they automatically, I guess, said, well, it's racist.
Yeah.
And the cops are racist, and and we really couldn't say. I mean, our side of the story would never. I mean, people could go to the newspaper and say whatever they want, but we couldn't.
Right.
Do that. So that was, but that's just part of the job.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to something like, what are your thoughts now with all the cops getting body cameras and things like that?
Well, that was one of my assignments at the police department, was researching that whole thing. I wouldn't say it was the infancy, but the toddler stages, I guess, of body cameras in police work. And I think body cameras overall are a good thing. But there's some caveats that go along with body cameras and video and images and things like that you can't always believe what you see on video. But our society is so ingrained in if they see something and their brain interprets what they see as this is what happened, then they are absolutely convinced that is what happened. And I would draw the parallel to sports, football. You got 20 cameras watching an angle, and you could, and even go to the Super Bowl, you could look at some of those things that happened, on some of the pass receptions from one angle, and you don't see, what's going on.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, that was a clean defensive play, clean whatever, and then you see the shot from the other side, and you say, "Whoa, hold it a second."
Yeah,
got
a hold of it,
right?
Yeah,
and so, but people are so in it's ingrained in us to what we see is what we believe, and with video, depending on the angle, the lighting, all kinds of other things. Sometimes what you see, isn't what you think that you're seeing, but especially when you get it to a jury,
right?
And so, but I, in a lot of the training stuff that I went through, they would show us videos, like police shootings, where you would look at something, and where there's a confrontation between one officer and a perpetrator, and the cop would shoot and you'd look at it and you'd say, he wasn't justified in doing that. And then you'd see it something else from another angle, and it's, oh, look, he does have a gun in his hand.
Yeah.
But I couldn't see it from that. Well, what if that video that exists is only that first video,
right,
that you don't see the gun? Just because you don't see it on video doesn't mean
it didn't happen.
That it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But because there is no video,
right,
you're going to say, no, that, it couldn't have happened. But then you throw in that other video. And some of the training I went to had some great examples where they would show us stuff from one body camera, and then they'd show you the angle from the other one, and it was like, wow. You really do have to keep a very open mind.
That's crazy, because I never thought that the video would prove something else.
Oh yeah.
I never thought that would. I'd never put that together.
Right. Yeah. So it's a two-edged sword, because sometimes it doesn't capture everything, or it distorts things, and it's tough to get people. Especially when you're going with a jury trial where you've got a jury of your peers who are brought up basically their whole lives that, well, if I saw it on video, it's true, it's real, that's what happened. You can't convince me otherwise, but I can then show you a video from a different angle or add more information to it that'll make you second guess what you thought. So you've got to take the video with have an open mind about it and understand some of the spatial distortion things that can come about with video, depending on what kind of lens is used, what the lighting conditions are, what like distance between me and you can be severely distorted.
Absolutely.
And if somebody, for example, has a knife or some other weapon in their hand, it may look like we're
right on top of
right
each
on
other.
top of me, which brings up a whole different set of things. Or it may look like we're far apart. And
so why did you need to
exactly
go that
why
way?
did you need to do that? Well, the guy was right on top. Well, no, the video doesn't show that. Well, no.
Yeah.
You've got to understand with that kind of lens,
right,
this is what happens. And but overall, the video is a good thing. There's some cops that were nervous about it, coming out, and I, would always tell look, if you're doing what you should be doing, you've got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could say the odds are in your favor, but gosh, the fact that there's odds still is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tough.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really tough.
Yeah.
Gosh.
But yeah, that whole video stuff. But yeah, that there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
Do you miss it at all right now?
Not really.
Like you're good.
Well,
I guess let me ask you this: 3 years ago, or were you just like done?
I had my mind made up to do certain things with my life, and basically, I quit work on a Friday and I started building the house on Saturday, and so building that house became, my next chapter in life.
Yeah.
And I miss the people. I mean, the people that I worked with, and just interacting with citizens and all that. I miss the people part of it.
Are you an extrovert or introvert?
I'm an introvert.
You are. Okay,
I
that's
can
what
turn
I
it.
sense.
I can turn it on when I need to. I can turn on the extrovert and do that, but I'm truly an introvert.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's how I knew you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, or how I know you.
Right. Yeah.
But
so I had a plan, a diversion, or whatever, and it wasn't that I wanted to get out of police work because I didn't like it. I love police work. Is the best thing for me to do. In this community, it was a great place. I mean, it'd be hard to come up with a better place to do police work than here. But when it was time to go, I had other things I wanted to go do, and so I've been off doing those other things, and I along that line, one thing I'll say, for years I was one of the biggest recruiters for quality young people to get into police work. and I've got to say, I have a hard time, thinking of having a conversation with a young person today to say, this is a great career. This is something, you should get into. I have a son-in-law who's a police officer, but things have changed enough. And I talk about, with my, people of my same vintage that have retired or moved on, and every one of us is like, I don't miss it. I'm glad I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would get into it today under the, conditions that exist today. And I certainly wouldn't, be an advocate for somebody.
Yeah.
And I really hate to say that, but I've got to be honest, that it's a totally different thing. And I just hope that kids that get into it, go into it, eyes wide open.
Yeah.
And one of the, used to be, and like I said, I was encouraging the right people to get into police work, and it's always, especially if somebody is married or contemplating getting married, it's a family decision, and it would be easier for me to tell somebody that's single and young and maybe not interested in getting married that get into police work, but when you take in all the family side of it, in fact, my daughter who's married to the police, I know she supports him now, but I'm sure she has reservations about.
Oh yeah.
The job that he's in now, and all the things
you just
that go
never
on with
know.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And when I got into it, there was a little bit of concern about that, but not a whole lot. And
did you ever lose someone, a friend?
Oh yeah. Well, Derek Gear was somebody that I knew from working,
sure, obviously,
in our department, the sheriff's department.
I couldn't remember when that was.
Right.
Yeah.
And that really, that shows you the strength of the your family in blue, and how we do band together, and we've got the support. I always said that I had, my family was one of the biggest families around, because I had some 250 people in my family that I knew would be there to support me, and they proved that they did that. And again, that's not the people, and people think, oh gee, there's tons of cops here. Well, there's not 250 cops in Granger. Maybe if we added them all, we might come up with that. But I'm talking about the people in dispatch, and the people in records, and the people in evidence. All the civilian people. Are as much a part of that family for me. And so you have that, and you really see it when something like the Derek Gear thing, where you have an officer that gets killed, and luckily we haven't had much of that, but we've been lucky too.
We have been lucky. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it is. That's the hardest part of it, right there.
Right.
Really.
Right.
Yeah. Huh. What's one of the funniest things that you ever got involved in? Yeah. We'll wrap up with this. We'll wrap up with, because I don't want to end on such a
right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have a hard time. I know I had a lot of funny things, but the way my mind works, when I go and do something, and I'm done with it, I'm done with it. God, I should have thought about that for a while, because I mean, I've got a lot of stories that people wouldn't want me to tell.
Sure. Oh yeah, obviously, yeah.
that are absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
That kind of go back, a few years, and nobody that was involved in those stories still works for the police department. And people ask me that quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, as soon as I walk out the door, I'll have something that comes to mind.
Sure.
And, I need to keep that in my arsenal of things to talk about to keep
did you ever
those things.
Did you ever have a moment, especially in your early years, like when you first got into it, where you were like, I knew what I was getting into, but I did not know that I didn't particularly think of something like this, that this would happen. And it doesn't have to be bad or good, it could be.
Right. No, when I was 17 is when I decided for sure that law enforcement was what I wanted to do. And so I used to do ride-alongs with the police department and sheriff's office here in Mesa County a lot.
Okay.
And then when I was in college down in Phoenix, I went on ride-alongs, and I got a real good exposure, so I knew pretty much what I was getting into.
Okay.
So I was not really surprised. I mean, you're always surprised by what people can do to each other. You're never going to be. There's always going to be something that comes up that like you can't believe, that somebody would do that. But then it's like, well, yeah, I can, because you can't make this stuff up, and stuff happens. But so I went into it, with eyes wide open. But I know through years, we've had trainees, that would, after a week or two of, being out there, they would just come in and say, sorry, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. It's not meant for me. And it's like,
now, was there a police academy at that time too, still, that you had to go through, or?
Well, you always have to go through a police academy sometime, somewhere. In my instance, I originally went through a police academy in Arizona before I came up here to work, and so I didn't have to go through a full police academy here. But sometime in your career, you're going to go through a police academy, and when I started working here, there was not a local police academy. You had to either go to Montrose Delta Academy or one someplace over in the Front Range, or there was also one at Rangeley, which was kind of a not a place.
So why was there all these police academies outside of Grand Junction? What was the thought?
There was just not enough. I don't know. Just there wasn't the impetus to have one here. Though they were local, I guess you'd call them regional police academies. And that's just kind of how things evolved. And a lot of it was, smaller communities couldn't send, didn't have the money to send people to Denver.
Right.
And so that's where they sprouted up. I mean, when I started, most of the people that I worked with, they would, if they hadn't been certified someplace else, the Montrose Delta Academy, and I'm not sure exactly what year the local academy came on board, but it was much needed, and has really served all the law enforcement well here.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
As far as the ride-alongs when you were young, I've always, like we were talking about before, I've always wanted to kind of go on a ride-along. It had to be pretty exciting and thrilling. I mean, I'm sure sometimes it's kind of boring too.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was. Again, it opened my eyes into what I wanted to do, and it's a very valuable experience. Of course, I'll tell you, some cops love having a ride along, and some cops absolutely hate having a ride along. But if you know somebody knows you, that's absolute best.
Yeah.
Because they're not.
The introverted cops probably didn't like it, and the extroverted cops probably really liked it. So how about you? Where were you at with that?
Oh, I loved having a ride along.
Okay.
Depending on who it was, some would be okay. We would have a 2-hour time limit. And this changes. I'm not sure what they have now, but we would have like a 2-hour time limit, so that if you had somebody that was not making your night at least a little bit more enjoyable.
Right.
2 hours is up. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. You got to
go. But if it was somebody, especially somebody that was considering law enforcement as a career, kind of thing, spending extra time with them to feel them out, see what they're made of, because I was always looking to recruit, quality people, because I wanted to work with quality people. So
absolutely, that makes total sense.
Yep. So
were you ever a observer in the ride along, or you were the officer in the ride along, where you had to like tell the person, the ride along I guess you're calling
right,
like stay here, stay down, stay here,
and
something serious, I guess.
And we, you have protocols on what you do. If you're going to something, I mean, the speech I would give people at the beginning of the ride along, if I look at you and say, I'm dropping you off on that street corner because you're not coming with me to what I'm going to, then know that you're going to be dropped off on a safe street corner. Back then we'd be near a payphone. Nowadays you don't.
More than likely, I'm not going to be coming back in a timely fashion.
But we'd drop them off, and but that kind of thing would just very, very rarely happen. But you did not want to be going into something, that was.
Oh yeah.
That. And so you have a whole protocol on how you deal with that, with that stuff. And so no, I never got anybody into too much trouble, though. I could tell you some stories from, years ago where, sometimes the ride along would insert themselves into, the situation.
Give me a gun.
And they would not, they would break the rules and wouldn't get a chance to.
Were most of your ride-alongs people that were in some sort of like, they were in it for some educational type of thing?
A lot of them were education with the college here. There'd be a lot of college students, young people that were looking at careers. But a lot of times it would just be somebody that wanted some exposure to police, a citizen who just wanted to know what it was like, and totally encouraged that. And then a lot of times it might be an officer from another jurisdiction that's contemplating coming here. And again, we'd use that as a screening tool. In fact, our officers would fill out like a little report card, on potential candidates after they'd ridden.
Oh, okay.
Because you spend a few hours in a car with somebody, you might find out that, the guy has a attitude that he wants to, beat people and do this, and absolutely we do not want him, or this person, ask a bunch of great questions, has a great attitude, great insights, good attitude, somebody that we would love to have. We'd get a report card and keep that on file.
Well, gosh, man, I could sit here and talk to you forever, and actually I hope that doing after this that you and I can get together more often.
Okay, sure.
And do that. But
I'm out there, and I'm retired, but I stay too busy. So
I got to come up to your place.
Oh yeah,
I want to check it out.
It's a nice place.
Yep.
Paul
Quimby, thank you so much.
Okay, well, it's nice to come down and talk to you.
Thanks.
Okay.